Hi, I'm your host and you're watching Real Crime Mysteries. And today we'll explore the bizarre case of the Great Maple Syrup Heist. On February 27, 2012, inspectors from the Federation of Maple Syrup Producers headed to a warehouse in the small town of St. Louis de Blanford, Quebec. Their mission: inspect the Canada's Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve, established in 1966. The reserve stored maple syrup collected by Canadian farmers who sold their harvest to the Federation, allowing them to sell syrup year-round rather than only during maple syrup season. The idea was that syrup would be taken from the reserve when supplies from the previous year's harvest ran low and then replenished once the new harvest came in. Simple enough. But when the inspectors knocked on the barrels, they heard a hollow sound. When they looked inside, lo and behold, they found nothing but dust. And that wasn't all. Other barrels appeared to have been tampered with. Water sloshed around inside, and the quality control tag indicated that the barrels had been filled with 1,000 pounds of syrup each, yet they were completely empty. Someone had stolen 30 million pounds of syrup, making it the largest theft of syrup in Canadian history. To say nothing of the rest of the world's history, Canada loves its maple syrup. Legend has it that in 1743, French explorer Samuel de Champlain discovered that First Nations people near Montreal were tapping sugar maple trees for their sap, boiling it down into syrup. Over time, the tradition caught on, and by 1904, commercial production began. Today, more than 11 million taps produce roughly 13 million pounds of syrup each year. No wonder Canadians love syrup. It's in their blood. But how did someone get away with stealing so much of it? While not producing any themselves, the Federation stores syrup on behalf of producers who deliver their product to warehouses across Quebec and Ontario. From there, the Federation sells the syrup through distributors to producers who add it to finished products such as cookies and candy. They also sell it to restaurants and grocery stores. Each sale is recorded on a document called a tally sheet. And once the warehouse has shipped out syrup, they check the records and restock accordingly. But sometime between February 2011 and February 2012, someone began altering the tally sheets, trucking syrup out of the warehouses and replacing it with water. Since maple syrup is graded according to density, the thieves figured that diluting it with water wouldn't change its grade. They would simply siphon the syrup out of the barrels, leaving just enough behind to satisfy the density test. They would fill the empty barrels with water and return them to the reserve. To pull off such a heist, the thieves needed inside help. Enter Richard Vallières, owner of a trucking company contracted by the Federation to transport syrup from the warehouses to processing plants. For years, he ensured that his drivers followed strict protocols, weighing the barrels and inspecting them for damage before sealing them up. However, starting in 2011, Vallières began getting lucrative offers from other businessmen who offered him cash to transport barrels of syrup to unknown destinations. As long as no one knew where the syrup was going, he agreed. After all, how could anyone keep track of 30 million pounds of syrup? Well, it turned out that the Federation was keeping track. And when they noticed the discrepancy, they launched an investigation. As dawn broke over St. Louis de Blanford on February 27, 2012, police raided 3 warehouses, arresting 4 men, a woman and 2 companies. Richard Vallières was among the suspects and soon became the main one. After all, the trucks used in the thefts were registered to his companies. Police also found thousands of altered tally sheets at his house, along with $2 million in cash, luxury cars, jewelry, and expensive watches. His bank statements showed that he'd suddenly become a millionaire too. His explanation that he won the money in a casino didn't wash with the police. Vallières' co-conspirators included accomplices who helped him siphon the syrup, as well as businessmen who bought the stolen syrup and resold it on the black market. A tangled web of deceit. Soon, authorities would find more syrup stashed at other warehouses, though nowhere near as much as the initial theft. But still, it was a lot of syrup. In addition to the syrup, police also uncovered evidence of tax evasion and a marijuana growing operation. Eventually, dozens of arrests would be made. But as investigators pieced together the timeline of the crimes, they realized that the thefts started in March 2010 and ended in January 2012. In total, the gang had stolen nearly 3,000 metric tons of syrup, enough to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool almost 7 feet high. The value of the stolen syrup, $18 million. To cover their tracks, the thieves had used several aliases and complicated accounting schemes. But in the end, it all added up to one thing. Richard Vallières, the mastermind of the Great Maple Syrup Heist. In June 2013, Vallières and his co-conspirator Jan Dion stood trial for their role in the heist. Prosecutors painted a picture of a sophisticated conspiracy involving more than 24 people. Vallières was convicted on all counts, including fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Dion was found guilty on lesser charges. Judge Louise Otis called the theft unprecedented, saying that she could not imagine how so many people could come together and commit such an elaborate fraud. The scheme was unusual, she said, because it had no violent component. You don't see blood, you don't see weapons, you don't see a threat, she said. It's almost funny. And funny it was, at least to some. Newspapers across the United States and Canada ran headlines about the bizarre crime. The New York Times ran, "A sticky situation. Theft of maple syrup." The Guardian went with "Canadian maple syrup heist may be largest food fraud in history." The Daily Mail said, "Oh Canada, land of syrup." Even The Onion got in on the fun, with nation reeling after thieves steal large amount of maple syrup. But for those involved, the reality was anything but funny. Vallières was sentenced to 8 years in prison and ordered to pay $7 million in restitution. Dion was given a suspended sentence and 18 months of probation. The other co-conspirators received similar sentences. In the end, the Federation replaced the stolen syrup from its reserve, ensuring that the following year's supply would remain steady. But the loss left the organization reeling, forcing it to borrow from private producers to meet demand. Although they eventually recovered the money for the stolen syrup, they lost something else: their innocence. Before the heist, the warehouses were open to the public, a popular tourist attraction where visitors could sample syrup and learn about its history. Now the syrup reserves are heavily guarded, accessible only by permit. Tourists can still visit the warehouses, but they cannot enter the main area. Instead, they must view the barrels from a distance behind fences. A sign warns trespassers that they will be prosecuted. No maple syrup sampling either. The syrup mystique is broken. So who stole all that syrup and where did it go? Despite the evidence against him, Vallières insisted that he was innocent. His lawyer claimed that the prosecution's case was based entirely on circumstantial evidence and that the Crown could unprove his client's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Whatever the truth, Vallières served his time and was released from prison in 2020. As for the syrup, most of it remains missing. Authorities did recover some of it from warehouses in Pennsylvania and New York, and a few gallons from a house in Florida. But the majority of it is still unaccounted for. Perhaps it's slathered across pancakes in some foreign land, or maybe it was boiled down to maple sugar and sold on the street. Who knows? But here's what we do know. Canada takes its maple syrup very seriously. The government has stepped up security to make sure that nothing like the Great Maple Syrup Heist happens again. So the next time you drizzle maple syrup on pancakes, waffles, sweet dreams, whatever, remember, it's not just breakfast, it's history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Real Crime Mysteries, please remember to like it and subscribe to our channel. And now it's time for your assignment. We've slipped a special message into this episode. Watch it again and see if you can find it. What's that? You haven't subscribed yet? Come on, don't be shy. Click the subscribe button and join the family. You'll get to see new episodes every week, and you might just catch another secret message.